Greetings and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to talk about Revelation again. This is called Decoding the Book of Revelation, and this is part one, Purpose and Old Testament Connection. I was going to do this over basically two videos into one. I decided though to just keep them separated, just so it's easier to go through. It makes more sense. It's not too confusing for myself or for anybody else. The reason I want to talk about Revelation first is because I have no doubt in saying it is the most, it's one of the most, if not the most, enigmatic and mysterious books in the Bible. And it is also one of the most, if not the most, difficult book to clearly and concisely interpret across the board. And a matter of fact, and I'll get to this at the end, I even wonder that the purpose of Revelation was even to be perfectly interpreted front to back in all ways. Not even sure that's what it was about. And I'll talk about what I mean later on. It's not to confuse us, but I'm not sure it's also a book that we're supposed to have perfectly crystal clear, concrete answers to everything. So a couple quick notes before I get started, because um, I've been covering some heavy stuff, and I'm going to continue to. And I first want to just make this very clear to everybody. I don't know everything. I do not know everything. I am not right about everything. I'm fallible. I'm finite. I don't want anyone to ever watch this and think, or read a book or watch a video and think that I know everything or that I think I know everything, because I don't. But what I have tried to do is I've just tried to study things the best of my ability, present them as truthfully as I can, give you my interpretation, make the case, and I'll guarantee you this, if I'm wrong about anything and I figure that out, I will change my view. I've done it on many things. As new evidence came in, as things were unlocked to me in my mind, I've changed my view, and I will again if I'm discovered that I'm wrong. I right hand to the Father, I don't hold any views that I know are wrong, that I know. I will change my view. But I just want you guys to know, and this is why I say often at the beginning of videos, don't just take my word for anything or anybody's word for anything without looking into it. Study scripture for yourself, go through history, go through Bible commentaries, do everything you can to get to the truth. Hopefully, what I do serves as a guide. Hopefully, what I'm saying is true most of the time. I believe it is, but I'm not perfect. So, along those lines, concerning Revelation, I want to say this. It's a bad idea, thoroughly bad idea, to make Revelation your foundation for the last days, for the study of what's called eschatology or the last days or last things. I would never ever advise anyone taking Revelation and making it your cornerstone, basically starting with Revelation to get to the truth of the last days, making that your foundation, your bedrock, and then going and exploring everything else. I think that's backwards. I think it's backwards. If you even want to look at it in a very common logical way, it's the last book of the Bible. When you're reading through scripture, the way it's organized and laid out, I think by God's direction through man, you would get to Revelation last. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is that it should be taken, I think, after you've considered everything else that's recorded. One of the mistakes people make is they think Revelation is the end time book, almost as though it's like official. It's the official end time book of the Bible. It's not. And I want to talk about more of that in a second, why it's not. But it does involve the last days. It certainly does. But it's not by any stretch the only book that speaks to it. And in fact, many other books speak much more clearly and less symbolically about it. And guys, for instance, Isaac Newton, for example, easily one of the most brilliant people who ever lived. He studied Revelation constantly. It was one of his favorite books to study because it's interesting, it's enigmatic, and he was brilliant beyond belief. Isaac Newton was puzzled by Revelation. The church fathers, there has been debate, guys, about the meaning of all kind of stuff within that book forever. To this day, I think there definitely are things we can glean pretty clearly and very good cases to be made, but there's a lot in there that is debatable to this day, and it always has been. So, for any of us to think we're going to go read Revelation and crack the code and understand everything, so I call this decoding the book, but I don't mean we're going to have perfect knowledge. I'm just talking about a framework for understanding the text, a framework. So, just as again, before I move on, I would not make this book the bedrock. Jesus talks about the end. Paul talks about, Peter talks about, other books and authors talk about it in, I think, more concrete ways. Study Revelation by all means, but don't make it your bedrock. It is the most debated book probably in the Bible. So just understand that. And for I think what people have done too is they've had a tendency to say, well, I'm just going to view everything in there literally, and that'll make it easier. Every single word's literal. In the next video, I'm going to show how that's completely not true. Anyway, don't make it your foundation. Look at other things first, at least in unison, at least at the same time, and understand nobody knows everything. No one's cracking this code to perfection to understand the book so thoroughly and perfectly. Not me and not anybody else. We're all trying our best to really understand this. And that's what this video and the next is about. The framework, just a way we can understand what the book was even supposed to be, the purpose. So, what I want to chiefly talk about here when we talk about its purpose is its Old Testament connection. I'm telling you this much I do know for a certainty. If you don't have a good grasp of the Old Testament, you cannot have a good grasp of Revelation because it is steeped like a tea bag in water. It is steeped in Old Testament thinking, Old Testament writing. The first listeners and readers, because there weren't a lot of readers, there weren't a bunch of copies of New Testament books floating around. People largely heard a manuscript read aloud, typically. But its first listeners and its author, John, were very Jewish people for the most part. Of course, they were Gentiles, but it was very Jewish in nature, and the readers were. And so they were expected to understand the Jewish thought process within the Old Testament. The apostles and the New Testament authors, their scriptures were the Old Testament. Jesus' scriptures were the Old Testament writings. That's what they were. So when the early church said scriptures, they largely meant the Old Testament, with few exceptions. There were certain New Testament authors whose writings started to become viewed as scripture. Peter even references Paul's writings, some of them, as scripture. But for the most part, scripture meant Old Testament. This book is highly steeped in the Old Testament. And when we talk about the symbolism involved in the next chapter, that will become really, really clear. There are all kind of things. The mark of the beast has precedent in the Old Testament. The great harlot, which I'll talk about, has precedent in the Old Testament. The empires, the sea beast, the earth beast, in Revelation 13, they have precedence in the Old Testament. It's just that way. So understand when John was writing, we need to be thinking, what's he referencing from the OT? What's he referencing? Because that's the right way to read Revelation. But there'll be more on that next video. But for now, understand this one thing. In Revelation, the past present, and future all exist. In other words, people go into it thinking this book is exclusively only about the last few years of human history. It's, like I said, it's the end time book. It only pertains to the last few years of human history, in which case it meant almost nothing to anybody before that. That's not the right way to read this book. What It's like you put the past, the present, the future, some literal things, some metaphorical, symbolic things. You put all of those ingredients in a blender and you hit, and what comes out of that blender is revelation. It's got some past, it's got some present for what John was going through. It's got some future. It's got some things that's gone, throughout all of history, and then some things that just pertain to the very, very end. It's got all of that. It's not one thing or the other. So, as an example, I'll prove this to you. Let's look at the past. In Revelation 12, 7 to 9, here is what John records. He says, "Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him." Now, let me ask you a question. John's writing at the end of the first century AD. When did this happen? When did Michael and his angels fight against the devil and his unholy angels and cast them out of heaven? Well, Jesus told us also in the Gospels that he saw Satan fall like lightning from the heavens. This happened way in the past. We don't even know exactly when. This, in my opinion, happened before the creation of humanity. So this may even precede Genesis 1 chronologically in order of historical event. That alone, and there are other things. I just want to give you clear examples. This tells us that certain elements of Revelation deal with not only the past for John, but the far distant past. It goes way, way back into history, even before man, possibly. There are other examples in Revelation that speak to past events. This is just a good example of it. So I hope that's pretty clear. We're not waiting for war to break out in heaven and for Michael to throw Satan out. That happened eons ago. What about the present? So when I mean present, I mean the present for John. When he was writing, that would have been the present for the book of Revelation. In chapters 1 and 2, he talks about the seven churches. He talks about Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. Those were churches and areas that existed at that time. Now, yes, some people will interpret those as church eras, and maybe there's some truth to that. There might be. But they certainly were historical places that existed and historical churches that existed. That is a present tense reality for John. So you got the past we've seen and the present existed. Then future from John, absolutely. Several examples. It talks about Jesus' return, his second coming. That hasn't happened yet. That hasn't happened for us yet. Anybody. The final world empires, like in Revelation 13, sea beast, earth beast, and those are yet to come. Now they happened in history, and they sort of have this history repeats itself, but there'll be a time at the end when they manifest fully those fulfilled empires, which I think were there. You have in chapter 18 the fall of Babylon. the final fall of the evil empire at the very end, in the likeness of Babylon, in the likeness of Rome, that has not happened. Then you have the destruction of the wicked in Revelation 20. Final destruction of Satan, the powers of evil, the wicked, thrown into hell. So, yes, there are clearly things that have not happened yet. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I hope what just that alone shows you is that the text is not specifically and exclusively about the last few years of human history. It does speak to it, certainly, as I just mentioned, but it is not exclusively about that. Rather, when I said at the beginning, I don't even think Revelation was meant to be this perfectly dissected, perfectly explained, nice, neat, tidy book. And the reason I say that is what ultimately this book is about, ultimate triumph of God. It is telling the story of the powers of good triumphing over evil. Jesus prevails, the King prevails over the forces of wickedness. The saints do inherit the earth, the saints do have victory. God does execute justice on behalf of his fallen saints, on behalf of his people. And not most importantly, but just as important, the world is set right. Revelation kind of takes the whole Bible out the way that Genesis brings it in. Whereas the fall, the very beginning, introduces a world of chaos, a fallen corruption, a world of corruption. Revelation takes it out in this world of triumph. Things are set right, and there's a new heaven, a new earth. It's the perfect fitting end. And I really think that's the story Revelation is telling. It's the triumph of Christ. It's the triumph of good over evil. It is the saints prevailing. It is all of these things. So, guys, I hope this helps as an introduction to the lens through which we view Revelation. It's not all past, it's not all present, it's not all future, it's not all literal, it's not all metaphorical. It's all of that going on. It's not the book that I would say is exclusively end time. It's not what I would sit and say, well, I'm going to make sure that it's the bedrock of everything I believe about the last days. I would look at other texts that are more clear, and I would absolutely study Revelation alongside of or even after that. A great book, a perfect fitting end, but it's steeped in Jewish theology. You have to understand the Old Testament, and you have to understand that it is a mixed bag of past, present, and future. So, guys, I will have another one next talking about the symbolic nature of Revelation, which, like I just said, it's not purely, but it is largely, in my opinion, symbolic. And I'll show you some examples in the next video of how that is. So I hope this was helpful, guys. Drop comments below. Come at you with another one soon. Until then, God bless.